Hi, I'm Marc, Technical Product Manager for Small Character Technologies here at Squid Inc. In today's video, we are going to discuss installing a 90-degree head pivot extension or 90-degree optical kit for our CO2 lasers. Okay, some of you might be wondering what this 90-degree extension is for, what we might use it for. Typically when we're using the 90-degree optical kit or extension, it's when we want our laser tube and marking head to be perpendicular to our product line, and we need our main focusing lens pointing straight out so we can mark on the side of our product. So what we're doing ultimately is we're taking our marking head and basically pivoting it up again so we can point or shoot straight out. There are some other capabilities of this kit. We've got some flexibility as far as pivoting the head as well. So we'll show you how all that works once we get this installed. So this is what we're going to put on the system. We'll show you how to get this in place of the regular, just straight tube that's on the standard system. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is actually dismount our marking head from our tube. All we need as far as the tool is concerned is a 4mm Allen wrench. Okay, this is going to allow us to loosen up and remove the collar that's holding the marking head in place. So we're going to unbolt that from the system so we can get the straight tube off, and then we can thread in our 90-degree optical attachment. Okay, two things to be mindful of before we start working on removing the marking head or unbolting it from the tube chassis. One is make sure your system is completely unplugged from the power source. Okay, so system off, unplugged. We don't want to run the risk of the system being turned on and marking initiated while we're working on the laser. And two, when you're working around the marking head and naturally also the focusing lens or the main focusing lens, is make sure that the travel cover that comes on the lens is reinstalled. So this just slides right on the main focusing lens. Put that back on. That'll help protect the system from potentially scratching it with your tools when you're working on this assembly. All right, so we only have 4 bolts that hold this collar in place, which again subsequently holds or clamps our marking head and tube to the assembly. One thing to be mindful of when we remove these bolts, so we're going to take them out completely so we can get this again unmounted from our tube assembly. One thing to be mindful of is the marking head is going to be completely free then of the chassis here. The only thing keeping it connected is the power cable right here. So you don't want this to just flop down and hang there. You need to be prepared for when you take the final bolt out that this is being held by somebody. You can do it with one person. I would recommend having 2. One person can hold this while the other removes the hardware. So really important thing to keep track of or be mindful of is that this will be free and just connected by this cord. Okay, so we're just removing again the 4 bolts here. Okay, so we've got our 4 bolts out. So again, now this is going to be free of our tube assembly, except again for the Galvo power cable. So again, you have to be ready to hold on to the marking head. We don't want this just, swinging and hanging there. So this is what we're after. This is what we needed to detach from the system. Now our next step is to remove the existing straight tube or straight shaft that's on the system. So this does thread into the bottom of the marking head here, this plate. One thing to be aware of from the factory, these are threaded in very snug, very tight. It does back out. If you're having a hard time doing it by hand, we can also detach this plate. There's just 4 bolts that hold that in place. Then you can put this in a clamp so you can get a little bit of extra force on the tube. Usually you can do it by hand, so all we really need to do here is completely remove this tube. So just counterclockwise, back it out. We're going to get this out of the way. Okay, our next step is to install our 90-degree pivot extension or 90-degree optical kit. So this is going to thread in place of that straight tube we just removed, okay? So you'll see we've got the collar here that'll mount it to the tube body and the threads that'll thread into the marking head. So we just need to install this. Okay, snug that up nice and tight. Now don't be worried if this isn't perfectly lined up. We do have a clamp on this assembly as well that will give us the flexibility to pivot the marking head. So you don't really need to be concerned at this point with how that's situated. As far as turning it this way, we can, again, loosen this up if we need to. So really the next step we want to take is getting this mounted back up to our tube, okay? So you'll see this is just a longer tube here. It's going to go into the exact same spot the original one was in. So all we have to do is slide the plate or locking collar back on, reinstall those 4 bolts, and we can make adjustments from there. All right, we've got our 4 bolts installed. Now, one thing I haven't done yet is completely snug them up all the way. I've left them a little bit loose. Reason being is we can pivot this, so we can get it level, you know, if we're just pointing straight out, or for example, if we want it to be on its side like this, that is an option. Now, one thing to be mindful of if we need to do this, you may need a little bit more power cable. Okay, power cable that's going out to the galvos. So if we need to do that, we'll quick show you how to fish out some more cable for the marking head. Okay, in order to loosen this, we do need a wrench, or a crescent wrench is fine. And again, we're just gonna unthread this locking collar here. So we're gonna go counterclockwise, loosen this up. That way, that's the start of us being able to feed some extra power cable out here. So again, we're just loosening this up right now. Okay, so we've got that collar loosened up. Now, usually there should be enough free moving power cable to just kind of slide out. Again, we just need a little bit more to have flexibility to rotate our head. Now, if you have any resistance here, if it's not feeding out easily, we are going to want to actually take off our top cover here and just make sure that this isn't getting caught on anything. Or, you know, we do have a zip tie in here. We want to make sure that that's not grabbing a hold of anything as we try to feed this out. So again, oftentimes you'll be able just to slide some extra cable out. If you can't, we'll show you how to open this up really quick and review where this is coming from, just to make sure, you know, worst case scenario, we're not grabbing onto anything. Okay, so first thing we're gonna do on the top cover is we're gonna remove 4 bolts. So you'll see there's 2 on each end, can't miss them. So we're gonna completely remove these, and after that, what we need to do on each side of our system at the top, there's gonna be a series of bolts that also hold this cover in place. So we're gonna need to go down and remove 5 from each side, okay? Okay, so once we've got that hardware removed, this plate will just lift right off. There are no connections or anything you need to worry about here, so we can set that aside. So now you'll see where we're getting this cable from. So we do have a bit of excess length in here, and again, we don't need much, maybe an inch or 2 at most. Okay, so you can see that coming out. So that's all we're doing is we're fishing out some extra power cable so we have that flexibility. One thing I'll point out really quickly here too is, again, with our 30-watt systems, we don't have any connections from the plate to our tube and marking head assembly. With our 10-watt lasers, the display you'll see is actually built into this cover. So if you're doing this with a 10-watt laser, again, the footprint's very similar. We'll actually get a shot of, just a 10-watt laser in general set up on the stand. So, from a mounting perspective, everything's the same, but this cover there is a difference. Since the display on the 10-watt is located here, you're gonna have some wires and cables connecting into this assembly. So just be mindful of that if you need to pivot the head, if you need to fish out more power cable. When you lift this up on a 10-watt system, you're not going to have as much flexibility naturally. You can't just set this aside. So just be aware of that. That's really the main difference. So with the 10-watt, you would just kind of lift this up, do the same thing we just did, but just be mindful of those connections. Okay, last thing we need to do, once we've got our collar locked in place, our marking head positioned where we need it, we're just going to go ahead and put this little locking collar back on for our power cable. Okay, so once we've got the collar tightened up, when we've got the marking head where we want it, one other adjustment we can make is we can also pivot the head. So in order to do that, we do have a tightening screw right here. This is actually a clamp, clamps down on a shaft that is attached to the marking head. So if we loosen this up, we can pivot the head. So we'll go ahead and do that just to show you guys how it would work. So you just loosen this up and we can pivot our head. Now this is another scenario where we might need some extra power cable. So just again, be mindful of that process as well. But that gives us some added flexibility here. We can turn the head, if we need to fit an angle on a roller or something like that. This again gives you some added flexibility. So once you've got it positioned where you need it, naturally just tighten up that locking screw and that's it. Okay, one question you guys might have is, when I'm moving the marking head, for example, it's upright now, if I swing it down to the side, is that gonna have an impact on how the system marks? Yes, it will, but you really don't have to worry about that. We can change all of that in the programming. So we can swap, for example, an X and a Y axis to make the system mark properly in the software. That can all be done in the programming. We really don't have to worry about much here. So just get the marking head positioned where you need it, whether it's upright like this, down on the side, or even at a pivot. That's all okay as long as our main focusing lens is at the proper focal distance from our product. Okay, one more thing to point out with this optical kit is, again, this is for our CO2 lasers. So either of our 30-watt variants or our 10-watt CO2 laser, this kit will work with those systems. This is not for the fiber laser, just to make that distinction. Okay, so this is specifically for our CO2 laser printers. All right, that wraps up our video on installing the 90-degree optical kit or head pivot extension for our CO2 lasers. If you'd like to see more videos on this product or any of our other systems, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, and don't hesitate to also head over to squidink.com for even more information on our entire product line. Thanks again.